Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. This is our next episode in our short series on coaching in practice. We often get questions about what coaching looks like in practice, so we are excited to share this series with you. In today's conversation, I'm chatting with Whitney Mercer and Megan Hallstrom. Whitney is the lower school instructional coach at the American School of Madrid, and Megan is consulting as a coach with her school. From start to finish, this episode highlights the importance of having a coach as a coach. The relationship that Megan and Whitney have built demonstrates the value of having someone to be vulnerable with, someone to work shoulder to shoulder with you, and someone to be a partner in learning. Not only will this episode convince you to work with a coach as a coach, but there are tons of gems in here that are worth sharing with your teaching colleagues to help them understand the value of coaching. To hear the full episode, subscribe to Coach Better wherever you get your podcasts. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to let you know that registration for our 5th cohort of the Coach Micro-Credential is open now. We only open registration for this academic year-long program once a year, and now is your chance to join our next cohort. If you're curious about how you can coach better with 26 weeks of curated coaching content, a private mentor, and a cohort of coaches to learn with, stay tuned to the end of this video to hear more. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. Today, I am super excited to have another partnership team here on the podcast with me. I have both Whitney and Megan, and they're going to share their story of how they started working together really as women in leadership, but also in the theme of coaching. So I'm going to get started by asking Whitney to please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your education background, where you are now, and just kind of how you got there.
Great. So, hi, I'm Whitney Mercer Okabayashi. I am currently the lower school instructional coach at the American School of Madrid. So I support our Kinder 1, which are 2 and 3-year-olds, all the way up through our grade 5 teachers. And before I worked at the American School of Madrid, I was in charter schools in Washington, D.C., public schools in Washington, D.C., both in a coaching capacity. And I began my career with New York City public schools as a teacher receiving a ton of coaching support in a public school in New York City, and I'm really grateful for that. So yeah, that's kind of the journey and how I got to my role with ASM now.
Awesome. I've actually heard so many good things about coaching in New York City public schools. It's nice to continue to hear the same story. And Megan, I know that our listeners and viewers are going to already know you, but just in case this is the first time they're watching, can you please introduce yourself and tell us how you're connected with Whitney and how this partnership kind of got started?
Great. Sure. So I'm Megan, and I'm currently in my 3rd year in partnership work with the American School of Madrid. And year 1, I was hired as a full-time coach and learner support member of the secondary team. So that's where Whitney and I first crossed paths, which really isn't what we're going to focus on today, but we were hired in as the 2 sort of essentially new coaches for the school's pre-K to grade 12 program. And then for the last 2 years, including this school year, I've been in a capacity as a consultant, but really my consultancy is a partnership in coaching. So Whitney and I work very directly together with the lower school work. My work focuses on math to support the work that she's doing for all subject areas.
So Megan, you're the consultant and the coach, and Whitney, you're the on-the-ground coach, basically.
Yes.
I think this is like the dream, right? You're the coach, Whitney, you have this great job in a school where you get to be so passionate about learning and work with so many teachers, but you also have this amazing sounding board expert who can come in and be that gut check for you and be that person that thought partner to go through that whole process. Tell us a little bit, I know you've kind of addressed this a tiny bit here and there, but how did your relationship develop from maybe the first year when you were 2 colleagues but working in different divisions And then now that you're working much more closely as consultant and coach and kind of in that coaching cycle, how did your relationship develop, and what would you say the outcome is at this point in time? And I'll start with you, Whitney. What are your thoughts?
So how did our relationship develop and the outcomes? I'm thinking about just the invaluable connection that Megan and I have when she's on campus, in our abilities to be vulnerable with each other in a way that sometimes you can't always make teacher facing, if that makes sense. That I want to be sure that I can be honest with Megan and realistic with her, and also share the bright spots, but also share the things that are uncomfortable with her. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm able to do that with Megan. And it's just been the sounding board that I was missing maybe the year prior, in that we both were in roles on campus, having our own super long to-do lists as they related to our primary jobs. And now having her in a consultant role, being able to come on campus in a very concentrated way for 2 weeks. And we go through our own kind of coaching cycle like we talked through. And then she's off campus, and we've got like 6 weeks to really try on that work and do it at our own pace in response to our own teachers' needs. And then I know she's going to come back because those dates have already been scheduled. It's just a sense of assurance that I really do feel like I'm able to affect change and achieve the purpose that I've set out to achieve, because I have this constant support for me. And I think in coaching roles, a lot of times we don't make space and time for our own support and our own need and our own learning. And that's what feels so different in this year's work versus something over the past 6 years, and even in other networks or other districts, because I really do feel like I have my own source of guidance and my own counsel, and someone who's going to give me a sense of direction or empower me to continue the work, or be very honest with me about when the work needs to change. So the outcome, hopefully, I think, like, we continue to be authentic and strategic and continue to strike that balance and just be responsive to whatever the division's growing needs are at the time. I'm sure, like, in lots of coaching conversations, we hear, like, one of the primary goals is for us to coach ourselves out of a job. And I think eventually, like, unfortunately, Megan and I probably won't be partnered with this division around the work, because by nature, like, our work has brought teachers to a different place. And there are tons of other areas of strength and growth that we have that we want to continue to support. So, but if it's not around math, I certainly will continue to lean on Megan just as a colleague for that continued empowerment and soundboarding.
So tell me a little bit more about how she supports you, because I think you mentioned a really good point that coaches often don't have a coach for them. So in your work together with Megan as your coach in this kind of context, what does she do that really helps you have that professional growth experience?
I mean, something as seemingly small as just the space to she's posing questions that are sometimes difficult to consider, and asking me to think through, what I think has changed in teacher practice, and I don't know. I think it's difficult to articulate, and I obviously haven't reflected enough on this, but what I always feel a sense of when Megan comes into town is like deeper insights around the practice. And I think that, like, support can look a ton of different ways, but even just creating the space to have these conversations that I don't have anybody else in a similar role, or I have very few people in similar roles that really understand the work that we're doing. So someone to validate. Also, I mean, in team meetings, sometimes things are tough and dynamics are challenging, and having someone who's literally shoulder to shoulder with us at the table, recognizing, what is working and validating that, but also, again, being willing to ask some difficult questions to the group that maybe I haven't voiced in the same way. So being with us in the work, being out of the work with me, being back in the work, just that fluidity of Megan's ability to make relationships with and make connections with all of the different stakeholders, and then kind of offline process all of that with me has brought clarity to my work, that really has been few and far between. So I don't know if that helps.
No, that's great. And Megan, how do you do that? How do you keep that focus on the strategic goals and also build those relationships with both Whitney and the individual team members and the teams as a whole? How do you kind of keep all that in your coaching kind of brain and make that work in a way where you're supporting Whitney, but you're not being that person, the expert who comes in and suddenly everyone looks to you? It's your partners.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think my gut level response is not going to be one that audience members are going to want to hear. I don't know how I do it. And what's interesting to me is I've gone through a lot of coach training. I've done the cognitive coaching work. Adaptive Schools has had a huge influence on how I present and how I interact. I've had coaches coach me that have been on site and in schools that I've worked in. And there are times where I think that there's like these coaching placemats that you could literally have in front of you and be following the scope and flow. For me, and for people that work with me and know me, it never feels natural to do something like that. And I've always anchored my work in really being myself, and the people who get to know me in my work, if I was talking to you in a meeting and then 2 minutes later we were in a classroom, or we're walking casually in the hallway, or we're outside of school in some capacity, I'd like to think that I'm my authentic self. And I think that that's a part that really builds relationships. And I think for me, I don't know that I set out and have a plan and say that this is the way that I'm going to do this, but I do think that it's incredibly important to know the person first. So I know that Whitney and I had the luxury of being new together year one, so we got to know each other in that way. And then what became very natural in year two when we were actually working together directly was just spending time with doors closed and the two of us working. So those things that she's highlighting, having a thought partner. And what I think is interesting that I want to make sure is highlighted, because maybe Whitney doesn't see this in her own work, she's incredibly vulnerable and her ego is out of the room. She doesn't sit down and feel like there's a space where she has to prove something or show her work. It's very clear in the work she does. It doesn't, I think anyone who works in coaching would see it, and it doesn't interfere with who she is. And that piece makes it easy to sit down with somebody in a room and know that we're both open to learning from each other has had a huge impact. And a quick example I'll share, because she mentioned this mixed grade level professional learning day and that being appropriate for teachers. It was also an opportunity for the two of us to kind of do our own coaching work together and live coaching. I was doing the workshop. It was a math workshop. And Whitney was in the room with me, and she positions herself as a learner, sits at the table with teachers and is doing the work, but she's also this like fluid facilitator learner. She'd hop up and with me, and never a threat to me, would say, I'm going to add something, or I have a thought here. But then we also, right in front of our teacher groups, whether they noticed it or not, we live coached each other. So there were moments when the teachers were off, maybe working on a task or turning in and talking to one another, that I would lean over and say, what do you think about this? And we'd click forward on the slides, and we would do a quick, almost bounce off of each other in that moment. And it impacted next moves because we were both picking up on different things among the teacher group. It also impacted next groups. I mean, and together, as anyone knows, the next day was even better, right? We had day one and we had a repeat day two, and there were just little tweaks we made, but we do that together. And I really think there's a huge point to make around vulnerability, openness, and ego. There's no ego in the room. And sometimes there's a feeling of like everybody's keeping like their safe distance because this is like my work and I'm doing this. And I never feel that with Whitney, and I don't feel I hope that I'm not presenting that in any way. I don't get that feedback, but I think that's probably one of the biggest points of success for our relationship.
So I feel like this is going to be a really hard question to answer. How did you get to that such a genuine partnership, that's such authentic, where you aren't one owning the other? What do you think, Megan, first, and then I'll ask Whitney.
I know for me, and whether this, I'm just thinking in this moment, I know for me that when I see other people work and I see authenticity, and I don't know how to measure that. I just know that there's a space where the work is important to somebody. That's clear. It's real to somebody. They're committed to it. It doesn't feel like it's the job they come to do every day, but rather it's like who they are and they believe in it. That piece was so clear to me. And then I think when I see somebody whose work impacts others in that way in teaching, and when I see people who really have the background knowledge and the information, I have incredible amounts of respect. So I think for me, sitting in rooms around tables when I see colleagues, and maybe I'm saying they're like-minded because I think it's maybe that own identity piece where I'm like, I think that I'm that way and I see other people that way. And so there's an immediate connection there. And I think for me, the commitment level is what I always know and see. So when I see somebody, and Whitney is this person that does the work, is committed to the work, it's clear, it's all that behind the scenes stuff that maybe teachers don't see, I see it. And that to me creates a huge amount of respect and trust. And then again, that vulnerability, that there's a space, as much as she's saying I might be her think partner, and that we can, be really honest and open with each other. It's the same in reverse. I see her as that person when I'm on campus, and I call it the closed door because it's the person you can sit down with and say, I'm thinking about this. One piece we haven't touched on, but I'll just add it in very quickly here, is we also do some parent workshops, and sometimes those can be the more volatile pieces around mathematics. I cannot say enough how important it has been. I have others who support it as well. Like, I'm not dismissing that our directors aren't there to support it, but to have Whitney and be able to sort of walk out arm in arm and go, okay, we did it, right? And oh, did you see this? And did you see that? And I know that should bother me, but it doesn't. And like, to have that person to talk to professionally is incredible. And then when you know that that's that person's authentic self, that that's who they are personally, it compounds it and makes it that much more impactful.
Well, that was like a beautiful little story there. Okay, Whitney, sorry. You were already ready to talk.
No.
And I was ready to jump in and call you.
No, I mean, that's pretty much my sentiment as well. There's a lot there that it's difficult to bottle that magic and really like boil down what is it. But I think what Megan's acknowledging, and I agree with, is when you're working with someone that you know is equally in it with you, and not because it's their job or their role or their responsibility, but just like who they are as an educator, it makes it really easy. So I don't know that we had to do a lot of work to get there. It was more of like the right circumstances. Like we found each other and another colleague the first year that we were together and tried our best to kind of build a triad of coaches. And just, I think because of the nature of each of our roles, something didn't click. And then having the opportunity for us to have someone who was on site in the work, and then someone who was going to come in, complement, continue to lead us, that was just like a nice change in circumstances that really allowed for us to start recognizing each other's strengths and knowing, I learned a lot more about who I am as a coach and what my strengths are and what my continued areas of growth are because of my work with Megan. And I think, like Megan acknowledged with the one example with the parent coffees, like, we know what each other's strengths are in that moment. Like, Megan's deep content knowledge and years of experience gives a lot more weight to some conversations with parents than I have. And me chiming in during those parent coffees saying, this is the work that we are doing in classrooms day to day, and here are specific examples of teacher work and student work. That's a strength that can complement Megan coming in. Same thing with our groups of teachers, really Megan and I understanding who's going to lean in what way, because we know ourselves better through our work together, has been instrumental. And then back to the original point of just, I think Megan and I are two educators that have shared values around the teaching and learning experiences that we hope for children to have in schools. So it makes it really easy to dig into the work and commit the longer hours or check in when we're not, it's a weekend and we're not working right now. Like, it's just a natural, because she is someone that I think of, whether it's Sunday afternoon when I'm planning or 2 weeks away from her visit. It's just a natural thought now because, again, I do trust that we both are in the work together to the same degree.
Listening to you talk about listening to both of you talk about how much you match professionally and maybe even a little bit personally, and the way that your perspectives on work kind of fit together and what you're doing, it reminds me how important it is to find that right fit and do good hiring, right? Because you two are clearly the right people to be at this school at this time, to be working with these teachers on these goals. Thank you so much for watching this video today. If this was helpful for you in any way, please head over to our website for the Coach Micro-Credential. As coaches, we know we can always coach better. And this academic year-long program is an amazing opportunity to help you level up your coaching skills with the support of your own mentor. I know that I'm telling you that as the premium mentor for the coach, so it doesn't mean that much, but I'm going to let you hear from one of the coach participants right now so you can see why they think you should join the coach.
Hi, my name is Deborah Hernandez, and I'm an education technology specialist here in Portland, Oregon. And what is one thing that I wish that someone had told me about the coach before I joined? One of the things that I've discovered is that your professional objectives also bleed into your personal life. So in terms of managing stress, balance, and gratitude, I've gained quite a few personal rewards along with professional advancement. And I'm looking forward to the future. Thank you.
Are you ready to take your coaching skills to the next level? Join the next cohort of the coach and make it happen.